Hey, welcome to the Eyes on Jesus podcast with Drew and Tim. Today, we are talking about burnout.
Yay. We
Yay!
love burnout.
Burnout. Really exciting. Like a car burnout? Is that
Yeah,
what we're talking
car
about?
burnouts, Fast 10. We're talking
Yeah,
about the
Fast
movie
10.
that I
So
haven't
we're going to
seen.
dissect the new movie. It's going to be great. No, we're talking about you and how you get burnout in life, how you get burnout at your job, and how we've both experienced burnout before. And so we want to dive into what we've experienced personally. We want you to be able to be in a position where you can think through that as well. And then we want to talk to you about how do we manage that? How do we learn from past experiences, and how do we manage future situations of burnout and prepare and not just be reactive, but be proactive and all that? And then also, how do we manage people, at work, whether you're in ministry or not? How do we manage people and make sure that they're not getting burned out either? So Tim, tell us a little bit about you and a moment where maybe you got burned out.
Oh man, so working in retail for 24 years, there's a lot of seasons of burnout. There's a lot of seasons with intense workload and questioning why you're even here. And when I knew that I was facing burnout is when I would start my day, I'd get to the store, unlock the doors, and already feel stressed and want to go home. That's without anything having happened. That's how I
Yeah,
knew I'm in a season of burnout, is when I can't even
that's
get
awesome.
through like the first customer coming in the building until I'm already starting to be like, where's the clock? I need to go home.
How long have I been here? 11 minutes? That's
Yeah,
it? Oh,
exactly.
geez.
And so I think for me, in my whole story I've shared, coming out of retail into ministry, and what that looked like, and not knowing that was the end goal that God had for me. And so at some point, burnout just means that you need to continue doing what you're doing until something opens up. Because if you start jumping with your feelings and jumping on the next thing that looks appealing, that can lead to more problems.
Yep.
Uh, and I'm not a risk taker at heart, and so for me, that's why I was at a job for 24 years. But also, some of it has to do with your personality, and some of it has to do
Yeah.
with what is the best thing for my family. Like, am I going to
Yeah.
start doing these crazy schemes and plans that are going to themselves burn out in 3 months and put myself at greater risk financially and the peace of my family? So some of burnout is just staying the course until something else opens up. And some of it is figuring out the why of what you're doing. Is it something God's
Mm.
called you to do? Have you called yourself to it and asking God to bless it?
There
That
it
can get
is.
us in trouble. I tweeted recently, I listened to Carey Nieuwhof podcast, highly recommend his podcast. He had John Gordon on. John Gordon said, you don't get burned out by what you do, you get burned out by forgetting why you do it. You
Absolutely.
don't get burned out by what you do, you get burned out by forgetting why you're doing it. And that is so profound in so many levels, because forgetting the whys of not just your job, but why you're working for your family, for a better life, for whatever that reason is, forgetting why you're in ministry, forgetting the whys of ultimately who we're working for. Do all things as unto the Lord, the Bible says. And so even if you're mopping floors or cleaning toilets at your job, you're doing it for Jesus ultimately,
Yep.
because we
Yep.
do all things for him. That's ultimately our main why. And there's other whys as well. But when we forget the why and we just focus on the day-to-day job, or the angry customers, or the boss we hate, then we start getting burned out. When that is repeated over and over, it's not just, you don't just get burned out in one day, you get burned out
Right.
repeatedly, doing
Right.
it over and over and forgetting the whys of why you're doing it. So what about a story for you, Drew? When have you been burned out?
Well, one time in particular was pretty bad, and it was recent. It's within the last 3 years. So I I had this stint in ministry where I'd been to several churches, com- just fully committed, fully believe, still believe that God was bringing me to those churches to work with those specific people. And the tension of the integrity of the gospel balanced with continuing to do your job and get paid was such a mental and physical weight. It just destroyed me so slowly, but so surely over time. So I had one church where a pastor decided we were essentially starting a church. Okay. So we started church, and things were just going so well. We had 9 people at our first interest meeting, 43 at our first Sunday, and 8 months later, we were in the 230s. We had seen growth like only God could do. It was incredible. And then out of nowhere, the pastor was like, hey, because of some marital stuff, I got to go. So I'm like,
Ruined your
now?
whole momentum, yeah.
Now? And he's like, yeah, I'm going to announce it on stage. It's like, now? You want to do this now? So he announces it, splits our attendance in more than half. I'm not the pastor. I'm a young guy at that point. New guy comes in, changes everything, changes the vision, changes what the church was even built and aspiring to be, what we felt like God was calling us to, and just completely just, changed the game.
Yeah.
Next church, sell out to a vision, sell out again to pastors, what he feels like God's calling him to. 2 years later, mental breakdown, leaves. Next leader, again, questionably just did some things as a leader that puts you in an uncomfortable situation, that doesn't align with Jesus. And then we have the final one, which was I get hired, and a couple months into the hire, pastor lets me know that he's leaving his wife.
Wow.
But he's going to stay the pastor. Don't worry. He's going to stay the pastor. And I was a campus pastor at the time. So in all these situations, battling the integrity of, this is what I know the gospel is. This is what I know I'm called here to do. And now either that's not the calling on the church. So my calling hasn't changed. What God is calling me into hasn't changed, but now the calling of the church has changed, or the leadership of the church has changed. And now we don't align.
Yeah.
Or I align really well with the leadership, but they don't align with scripture now because something's changed in their life. So it was really challenging. And, I really wasn't in a position of putting all my weight in a person or a human being. Because, that was the first thought that crossed my mind in all these situations. It was like, okay, have I put too much faith in a human being? Now that person has failed me, and I've replaced God, I've replaced Jesus with this person. But that wasn't it. It was the tension of, am I supposed to stay if this is happening?
Yeah.
If X, Y, and Z is happening, especially with the last place. I mean, if the guy is leaving his wife, and I'm supposed to tell people that marriage is important and family is important, and this guy can't manage his own family, but he can manage a, 1,000 to, I don't know, 3,000 person church. I don't think that's biblical. So the integrity thing really weighed on me a lot. I do everything I can to be as transparent and open and honest as I possibly can be in leadership. I don't try to string anybody along. I don't try to string employees along. I try to be upfront and tell people what I'm thinking and where we're going and what we're doing. And I try to point everybody to Jesus that I can. Because life's too short to do anything else. And so when you have somebody then that you're working with in consistent situations that's faking it, it's so hard.
Yeah.
So I walked away from the best salary I've ever made. Walked away from the best, without a doubt, the best staff I've ever been around. To this day, I would just absolutely love to have those people back. Walked away from so many good people, so many good opportunities, and even selfishly from a status standpoint, I was finally at a place where I knew I needed to be and wanted to be, and I wanted to achieve it. And I wanted to know that I could accomplish being a campus pastor, growing up at campus, things like that. And I was just, everything was right. And that's what made it so hard. Everything was right, except the integrity of the gospel.
Mm. So that's a good point.
So,
Go ahead.
yeah. Well, I was just saying, so I walked away. I walked away, but, for months carrying around that burden
Mm-hmm.
of, well, look, man, God's still moving. Look, man, you're still around good people. Look, man, things are, you're still good. You're providing for your family. It's just, hey, just look at it as a job. Like
Yeah.
you have all these internal narratives, and then you're like, but this isn't biblical. And so you walk away, and eventually you get to a point where you're just like, you know what? I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
So I had 8 months where I said, I'm done with ministry. I'm done with putting faith into anyone's vision. I'm done working at churches. I'm just done. I'm just done. And 8 months later, I became a lead pastor.
God's humor, huh? Yeah.
Yeah. And so now, I try to make sure I don't make the same mistakes, and I try to make sure that everything I do, I'm not trying to be something. I'm not trying to do anything. I'm just trying to point people to Jesus, man. And I really don't care how many people we have. I've seen churches of 9 be effective. I've seen churches of 38,000 be effective,
Yeah.
and everything in between. So for me, it's like, this is me, this is who I am. But my number one goal is for me and my family to be healthy, because if me and my family are healthy, then the people I'm caring for, I'll make sure that them and their families are healthy, and the people they're caring for will make sure their families are healthy, and so on and so forth. And even if we only have a couple hundred people at this church, if we have faithful and we have healthy families, that right there makes an impact for generations to come. So that's the goal.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
I think I was thinking when you were talking about how burnout can hit us externally and also internally,
Oh
and
yeah.
how when you think of externally, we're talking about our job as a whole, and then also other people that can
Right.
cause us to feel burnout, which all of it impacts us internally one way or another, but there's things internally that may have nothing to do with our people around us or our job.
Oh yeah.
We have sin,
Right.
if we're not, decompressing and finding ways to unwind and to be healthy in our spiritual walk with Christ. Those can impact us internally and burnout. But externally, like, what do you do when things are out of your control and you're feeling burnout, let's say at a job, or like, with bosses that are not, you know, doing what they're supposed to? How do you maintain that feeling of not burning out despite the fact of things you can't control, which puts us in a
Right.
place of like, I feel like I'm out of control. I feel like I'm, you know, heading toward the burnout, which, like I said before, burnout doesn't happen immediately. It's a consistent
Oh
pattern
yeah.
that happens over and over without renewal. Think of like a fire going out. If you're not constantly putting a log on the fire,
Oh
eventually it
yeah.
will go out. It will burn out. Even Romans 11 says, don't burn out, keep yourselves fueled and aflame, be alert servants of the master. That's a Message version, but that's the version
It's
that
good.
has burnout in it. That's something that
Yep.
keep ourselves on fire, keep our fire burning. Even Paul told the Ephesians, awake, awake, O sleeper, and rise from the dead, and Christ will give you life. He's talking to Christians to stay aflame, stay on fire.
Right.
And we have to be cautious, because even as Christians, we can burn out both in our spiritual walk. And so speak to that, Drew. If someone's dealing with external circumstances that are out of their control, how
Yeah.
do they keep those from allowing them to be burned out?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is you got to be proactive. So that means you don't wait for the burnout to set in and then go, man, I really got to do something here.
Right.
If you're at that point, like if you're listening to this and you're like, well, great, Drew, I'm already there. Okay, well, hold on, I'll get there. Okay. But starting out, you want to be proactive, which means you got to lead yourself really well. The hardest person to lead is yourself, because man, the way you talk to yourself and the way I talk to myself, there ain't nothing good about that.
Yeah.
So we have to do a better job of leading ourselves and not be reactionary to our circumstances, but really be proactive. So for me, it's going to be different for different people. But for me, I do that through quiet time with Jesus. I do that through different podcasts that I listen to. I do that through different people I connect with during the week that are outside of my circumstance. I think that's really important, because you know what happens if you start connecting with people inside your circumstance. That will just lead to gossip, and you will just
That's right.
bury yourself in that narrative. So every week to this day, I connect with people that are outside of the ministry world. I don't want to talk about, like, the deepest we get is how's church going? I'm like, good, man. How's your job going? Good. And then we just talk about anything other than his job and my church. We just do. So you've got to have somebody outside of what you do that you talk to. I think that's really important. I think that you need to figure out how you best can lead yourself, whether that's through a podcast, whether that's through reading a book, whether that's through, honestly, whether that's through just sitting for a moment in silence and just like breathing. Okay. If you want to call it meditation, that's fine. I don't meditate, but I spend moments sometimes before I go pick up my kids from school, just breathing. Because I know that I'm about to shift from like this worker to now I'm dad mode, right? So I just need a pause. Whatever that is for you, you've got to decide what that's going to be. You've got to work at it, and you've got to put the time in. If not, you're not going to be able to stay in the ring very long. It's not going to be it's not going to be a long fight.
Yeah.
And that's a problem, because life's long. Like life's short, but life's long.
Yeah.
And so if you're not going to get burned out, you got to lead yourself well. The other thing you got to do, just like you mentioned, you got to keep the why in front of you. I believe you can get through any what if your why is strong enough.
Yep. Yes, you can.
So you have to establish what your why is. Write your own vision statement. You know, figure out what that is for you. For me, and I've gone through different seasons of life of what my why is. I spoke in a previous episode about a kid named Anthony. If you want the whole story, you need to go back. What do we remember what episode that was on that I talked about Anthony? It was 2 or 3 episodes before this one, but I don't remember the name of it. But I went deeper into this story. But there's this kid Anthony that I knew when I was in high school, and invited him to church. It was kind of a missed opportunity. And to this day, like, I think about people that are close to me and far from God that need to know Jesus. And that's what I serve through. That's what I work through. When a day rolls around, like this morning where I'm message prepping and I'm like, my eyes are so tired that I'm having a tough time even reading through my message. It's like, nah, like what if somebody comes in this week that needs to hear this?
Yeah.
Like, oh man, my why's strong now. My eyes are alert. I'm good now. Like, I'm good. Let's read through this. Let's work through it. So you got to learn what your why is in different seasons. That can be a person. It can be a saying. It can be a vision. Go ahead.
So that was episode 9, by the way. We took rapid fire questions. So just in case
Perfect.
anyone wants to go back 9, and hear that. Yep.
Love it. Episode 9, rapid fire. It's a little bit of my testimony as well. And you know, the other thing that's really valuable when you write out something like a wise statement is when you get into these negative narratives, you can start saying those things over your life. And so if you want to go biblical, memorize scripture, combat what you're telling yourself and what you're seeing around you in your situation with scripture. That's always going to be a healthy way. For me right now, like, there are several times during the day where I talk about what kind of leader I am. Because if I talk about what kind of leader I am, or at least aspiring to be, then I will put in the action steps and I will put in the disciplines that speak to getting to that place. So if I'm going to be a bold, consistent, disciplined, forward-thinking, and intense leader who surrenders each day to Christ, then that means I've got to do some things. And so that means I got to wake up on time and don't waste time. I've got to serve my family and control my tongue. And that means that I've got to point others to Christ.
Yeah.
And I say that, like what I just said, I say that to myself multiple times a day. So for you, if anyone's wondering, like, how do I combat burnout? You've got to get disciplines in your life. You've got to establish what your why is. You've got to be proactive in leading yourself. And you've got to have some time where you're either just breathing or you're at the gym and you're really just taking some time for yourself to go, all right, like I can do this. This is what God says about me. I'm ready. I'm geared up. This is who
Yeah.
I am. And power through, because
So
it's a fight.
so you're telling me it's work. Is there a quick fix I can do, like a pill I can take or something to just avoid
Yeah.
burnout?
Yeah. So the quick fix is you quitting and not having any money.
Right. Yeah.
That's
And that,
the quick fix.
yeah. It's amazing how, the things we know we're supposed to do, oftentimes we want to escape and find other ways to deal with it. And that you'll find that too. If you're going through burnout, you're going to look for quick fixes. You're going to look for things that are appealing, that give you a release, that allow you to feel other feelings besides dealing with the things that you're actually needing to deal with. And that's where sin comes in. You can think of all the sins that start to look appealing when
Mm-hmm.
you're not dealing with marriage problems. And so then this other person that's talking to you looks pretty appealing in the moment because you don't want to deal with the root issue that's at play, is that you're not honoring your
Yep.
spouse. And so burnout will come and it's like, oh man, their marriage just fell apart overnight. No, it didn't. Like,
No, it didn't.
marriages don't just fall apart overnight. You don't go through burnout overnight. It's through consistently ignoring the warning signs.
Right.
And it's when we keep our eyes off of Jesus that we start to go into problems. And Jesus even said, cast your yoke upon me. My burden is easy, and I'm gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, my burden is light. Matthew 11,
That's
28.
right. Yep.
And I've read that before, and I think, like, how could his yoke be easy, right? There's so many problems in life. Christianity is
Yep.
hard, church is hard. How could the yoke of Christ be easy? And when you think
Right.
of what a yoke is, when oxen are yoked together, they're joined together so that they can go
Right.
further together than they could individually. And so when we're yoked with Christ, it's not that life is, quote, easy all of a sudden. It's that we're connected to the source of life who's yoked
Right.
with us, who allows us to go further together than we could on our own separately. That's what he means by connect with me, the source of life, what your soul actually needs.
Right.
And it's through consistency. It's through consistency. It's not just, yeah, I'm going through burnout. I tried praying, it didn't work, and now I'm going to go back to this thing, right? It's no, well,
Right.
do it for months at a
Right.
time.
Yeah.
Do it until you see that breakthrough. How bad do you want it?
Yep.
There's no victories. I saw this quote too from Eisenhower. He's talking about war. There's no victories at bargain prices, he said. And I love that, because in our spiritual walk, there's no victories at bargain prices. I want freedom from sexual sin. I want freedom in my marriage. I want freedom at work. I want to feel all these things and connected with God. There's no quick fix. There's no
Right.
bargain method. It's the tried and true method of spiritual formation that happens over time. And so as long as you're on the right path, right, look at the fruit of what you're doing and the progress. Don't look at the end result. Like, keep the end result as
Right.
a why and how you're going to get there, but also look at the progress that you're making and be encouraged by that. And if you're not making progress, if you feel like you're going backwards, that's the time to wave the flag, get help, be in accountability with people,
That's
and
right.
start to dig into your routines. Because even if you're in a cycle, and I've been in this cycle where you wake up, you have an hour drive, you work for 10, 11, 12 hours, you come home, another hour drive, and then you barely have time to eat, to do any chores around the house, to see the kids. Then they're in
Yep.
bed, and you just rinse and repeat. I've been in
Yep.
that cycle. I worked hour and a half away for 5 years. And those seasons of life are harder than others, and it's easier to get burned out when you do that. But at the same time, you have to be intentional that, all right, this is a season. This won't last forever. I need to
Right.
be, if I have 15 minutes after the kids are in bed, I'm going to use that 15 minutes wisely. Uh, and that doesn't mean either, like, some of my ways to deal with stress is to play video games or to watch
Right.
something crazy, a Netflix thing or a new show. But also do it in moderation, right? I'm not going to spend 4 hours on it. I'm not going to do it at the expense of my family or at the expense of my spiritual connection
Right.
with God. but there are important ways, like on days off. What are you doing to regenerate, to renew yourself? There's, take vacations. It was hard for me in retail to take vacations. We did it anyway, but take time away, take ways to engage with God, with nature, with connection with your family. But also don't just live for the vacation trip either, right?
Right.
If you're so burned out that you're just crawling into a vacation, 2 weeks, or maybe it's a week, and then you're back at the grind and you're going to get burned out until the next vacation. Like that's not
Yeah.
the way to live
It's not
either,
healthy.
right?
No.
You need both.
You do. And it needs to, the key word there is intentional. You need to know, you need to know what you need.
Yeah.
And then you need to recognize that whatever that vacation is, or whatever that time away is, that's what it's there for. That's what it's there to do. I love what you said about, just digging in a little bit, and it's not just a one-time thing. It's not like a one-time prayer or whatever. One of the things that sometimes people will just assume about pastors is when they like write a sermon or something, that like God just speaks to them and God just gives them a sermon. They just spend time in prayer, and then, they just write a sermon. And it's very much digging. It's like going out in the backyard with a shovel and digging a hole. And after you're sweating and your hands are blistered and you're like, oh my goodness, like this ground could not be harder. Then you're like, all right, now my sermon's now my sermon's done, and my back hurts and I'm tired and I just want to go lay down. It's digging. When you're battling burnout, it's that. It's not it, like you said, it's not just a prayer where you're like, oh, God's really centered me. God's healed me. I think I'm better now. No,
Mhm.
like it's going to take time, and it's a fight. You got to put the effort in, and sometimes whatever you put the effort in towards first, that might not be what solves it, but it might be what leads you to doing something else, or something else that
Yeah.
then solves it. I'm curious, Tim, when we talked about our burnout situations, I know for you, yours was very much like physical, mental,
Yeah.
the grind
Mhm.
came from a workplace standpoint. Mine was very much like ministry, integrity. What do I stand for? So, still both of us carrying the burden, but in different aspects. How long did you go through your process of battling that burnout? And for you specifically, like what did you do? Like, what were the actionable things that you were like, all right, if I'm going to be able to like go another day, I have to do this?
Yeah. Yeah. There's different parts in my time in retail when I would just apply randomly to other jobs, right? And be like, this is the way out. This is what I need to do. Get a quick answer this way, and no doors opened. Um, or I would, spend more time on casual things just to get my mind off of work. Um,
Yep.
Even in the midst of like the burnout, I had a pretty good balance of not overworking. Uh, Granted, there were long days, long hours, but I mean, there were some people that would work 20-hour shifts, and I would be like, I'm 10 hours, I'm out. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
going there. Or I would be able to disconnect from work when I was home, which was a big thing. Um, so even looking back, there were certain things I did to kind of keep whatever sanity was there, but at the same time, looking at the constant stress, because in retail and business, it's always, what have you done for me lately? Can never rest
Yep.
on what you did last week. And even like for the day that you're in, you work a truck, you get it all stocked, and then it's like, oh, we got another one tomorrow, another one tomorrow. Like it's just constant. There's never like a time, and you're always looking ahead. You're always looking ahead, like 6 months ahead at the next holiday, at the next season. So it really became hard to even enjoy like Christmas season, right? It's so
Oh
stressful,
gosh.
and you're already looking ahead at
Yeah.
January. And so I found it really hard to just even enjoy going to see, right, Christmas lights or whatever with my kids, or enjoy the one day I got off, for the month and Christmas Day, and like I got to get back in the morning, wake up at 4 a.m. Um, so looking back, it was really like key moments of just like trying to connect, but also realizing I was in a cycle where it became very hard to, just with the nature of the job. And so, but the answer to burnout is not necessarily to change jobs. It might be, It might be that you need to ask God, that is this really where I'm supposed to be, and is my why centered along what you want? Because a lot of burnout comes from self-reliance, upon
Oh yeah.
relying on ourselves and my own mind and the education I received and what I think I need for my future. Burnout comes from self-reliance, and it also comes from lack of self-care. So if I'm not caring for myself, if I'm not caring for my heart, my soul, my connection with God, like we talked about, then we can lead down that path of burnout. And when burnout hits, I know I've never been at the point where just crash and burn, but
Right.
going back to Carey Nieuwhof again, he talks about his story of burnout. He has a lot of people on that talk about burnout. Uh, it's pretty intense, and it is a life-changing event sometimes, where your whole world comes crashing down. You have to kind of rebuild. And that's what we're trying to avoid when we talk about these things. You're trying to avoid the worst case scenario, the thing that you don't
Right.
see coming, the thing that has been brooding and building for months, but you can't see it because you're in the thick of it. And you might even have warnings from a pastor, a friend, a spouse telling you, but you're like, no, no, I'm good. I got it. You don't got it.
Yeah.
And so have you ever crashed and burned like that? Or how do you know when that's coming to the point where you can say like, all
Yeah.
right, pump the brakes, let's figure out a different strategy?
There was one time I took a vacation, and day 2 of the vacation I got incredibly ill.
Mm,
And it wasn't like, oh, you just had a sinus infection and it knocked you on your tail. No, no, it was my body shutting down and telling me that this isn't healthy.
yeah.
Um, this was right after I had transitioned to a new church. I was working at a new pace. I was determined to make sure everyone knew I could do what I was being asked to do and then some.
Mm,
And I was being also, not only was I putting in unhealthy hours, I was also being asked to work unhealthy hours. And it was beating me down. And then here comes the weekend. I just got to make it to the weekend. I'm getting a weekend off. Here it comes. I'm all good. And day 2, I was in bed and I hurt and I ached, and
mm.
my mind just shut down on me. Like wouldn't like just I like slow, like I talk slower, I think slower, like my whole body just needed a reset and a reboot. And then I went back to work and I worked for another 11 weeks and had a weekend off, and my body did the exact same thing. And
Wow.
I don't get sick, bro. Like I don't get,
Yeah.
I get little allergy things, but like I'm a pretty healthy dude. Other than, eating Sour Patch and drinking some energy drinks every once in a while. And I just do that
Amen.
because, genetics tell me I can. So I, I, I recognized immediately, like, whoa, is this it? This is what I'm supposed to do. I'm just going to be unhealthy. I'm just going to run around like a chicken with my head cut off all the time in the name of Jesus and in the
Yeah.
name of my boss.
Yeah.
And then just be sick when I'm supposed to be with my family. Like it was rough. So I have gotten to some points where literally my body just couldn't do it anymore. But in the same respect, like that led to some really good conversations that allowed me to go to my boss and be like, hey,
Yeah.
I don't think this is right where my family is right now. I don't think this is happening. Boss came back with, um, you know, basically suck it up, buttercup kind of answers, which the way I'm wired and the stage of my life and being a dad and husband, like that's not how you win with me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a put some dirt on it and get in there kind of guy. I mean,
Yeah.
I am if we're playing baseball. I am
Yeah.
if we're playing a sport, but if we're trying to be healthy so that we can care and minister to others, it's
Yeah.
not really the way to go for me. So it led to me recognizing that I was in the wrong place, and that's a good thing, because even though I was burned out to that extent, it allowed me to really get woken up and be like, wow, as much as I love working here and as much as this is really a lot of fun, like this is unhealthy
Not
and I
sustainable.
can't,
Yeah.
right, not sustainable. And so I can't minister to people at this level. So I think if people are getting to that point and they're like, well, I don't see a way out. Yeah, you can sustain for as long as you want, but
Yeah.
you gotta be healthy. You gotta get control of yourself, take
Hmm.
care of yourself, and make sure you're in a good position to live life.
Yeah, for sure. I think too, it is a different issue in ministry
Yep.
for pastors. And so I want to talk about sabbaticals real quick too, and the importance of
Yep.
them, because the biggest eye-opening part of learning about this was a book I read called Leading on Empty from Wayne Cordeiro, who
Okay.
I've met him in person. He's a great guy. And this book was just so eye-opening on his burnout story. So he burned out in ministry and didn't realize that he needed, time away in sabbaticals. And he actually went to a monastery for, I forgot how
Oh
long,
wow.
but it was a monastery where they didn't speak. And so he's in there doing stuff with them and just like complete silence. And he almost like, goes crazy with just like the complete shift in what he was used to.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I
What
read
would
the
I
book.
do there?
Well, that's the thing, it's like, it was like an extreme answer to an extreme situation.
Right.
So anyway, I would highly encourage the book. I'm not going to go through all his story, but the thing with the sabbaticals too is that pastors have to deal with a lot of things that people don't realize. So you might deal with a married couple with infidelity. The next day you're doing a funeral. The next day you're celebrating a birth, and then the next day you're giving a sermon that you had hardly any time to prepare for, and then you just rinse and repeat, and you're living for Sunday, and you're living for the conflict and the backstabbing of Christians and the gossip and all these things that sometimes come with ministry and many times do.
Right.
And so when I dealt with a sabbatical, I was on the elder board, and our senior pastor wanted to go. And a lot of comments I heard is like, "Oh, I don't get a month off in my job." That was kind of from certain people that didn't understand the heart of it. But
Sure.
first of all, do you want your pastor healthy? The answer should be yes.
Yep.
And so we have already talked on this episode of what happens when pastors are not healthy.
Right.
And so there's an attack on ministry leaders. You look to take out the captains in a war, and then the sheep will scatter, if you will. And so we have to make sure that our leadership is healthy. If you are over pastors, or if you're a pastor yourself, that you are taking time away and not just living for a sabbatical once a year or once every 7 years or so, but having those times to decompress, to talk with somebody. Oftentimes it's the loneliest position at the top, because you don't want to share what you're dealing with, because then people you think will judge you, or they're in your church and then they're going to spread
Right.
gossip, and you've probably been hurt before from
Right.
people that have done that. And so, like you said, find someone away from the church you can talk
Got
to
to get
about
somebody
anything.
outside.
Right. So
Absolutely.
anyway, I would say, encourage your pastor to do that. If your pastor does go on vacation, like in the summer, like many do, please don't talk about, how, oh, it must be nice. Like, ask to support them. Hey, I heard you going on vacation for 2-3 weeks. Like, is there a way I can step up? Can I do something around the church? Can I do
Yep.
whatever? We have someone in
Yep.
our churches just did that this summer. One of our pastors is on sabbatical. He's coming in early. He's fixing stuff. He's cleaning stuff. He's doing whatever's asked of him. And I love that heart. And that's what we need to support our pastors, put them
Yeah.
in a place where they can be successful because of our support, and not just put them, not just try to pull them down from a position and say like, oh, I told you so.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how many jobs you have to deal with counseling a family who just lost a child on a Saturday and then turn around on Sunday and speak hope to everyone.
Right.
And I'm not saying like my job's harder than yours. That's not what I'm saying at all. Because it's, to be honest with you, it's probably not. Like I'll just be real. It's probably not. But from a mental and heart level,
Yeah.
there's there's a lot needed to carry and hold the burdens of other people, the burdens of your own self, and still minister through that, still preach through that, still guide through that. And, ultimately, like, you're expected at all times to be this full of joy, loving pastor. I'm like, dude, sometimes I ain't feeling that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't fake it. but sometimes I have to actionably be in a place of effort before I'm there in feeling. So sometimes on Sunday mornings, my hands are up in worship, not because I'm already there and hands are up in worship. Sometimes I force my body to get there so that my feelings will catch up.
There you go.
And so, yeah, I think it's really important that pastors get time away. I think it's, they cut, golly, man, when a pastor comes back from either a sabbatical or time away, there's for about 9 weeks, it's just awesome because they're thinking so clearly. They've got new ideas, fresh ideas. You can just tell that, and they're almost like renewed to be in the ministry. It's like it's the same feeling as like if you hire a new student pastor and it's like his first time being in student ministry. Like you get that guy, who's comes into the first meeting. I've got this idea. We're gonna call it this. This is what it's gonna look like. Like you get that guy, but like seasoned.
Right.
Right. So I think it's really helpful. I am curious. You mentioned the sabbatical. So for me personally, I've never taken officially a sabbatical, although I think you could argue that the 8 months before I took this position, there were probably some parts of that where I'm very much soul searching and spending time with God in order to figure out what's next.
Yeah.
How often do you recommend a sabbatical? What's the length of time? Because I mean, I've heard everything from a pastor should get a sabbatical every 7 years and it should be for 3 months to a pastor should get a sabbatical every 3 years and it should be for 3 weeks, So I'm curious as to what you prescribe to.
My personal opinion, I would say every 7 years and then 1.5 to 3 months.
Okay.
Full sabbatical.
Yeah.
Now within that 7-year gap, then take at least like a full month either off or break it up into 2 weeks and 2 weeks, so that you do have that time away, not just like, oh, I'm taking a long weekend, but actually time away to decompress. And then that's the difference with like vacation versus sabbatical too, is like you should be getting vision from God. Like you're not just tuned off spiritually, like you're actually getting filled up so that you can come back and instill vision and then process what happened over the past few years and then see what God's doing for the next few years ahead of you.
Right.
And so that's a big difference between quote vacation. Like vacation, you can turn off, like you can turn off everything, not check your emails, not call anybody at work, and then deal with the mess when you get back. But sabbatical is different in the vision building. And I would say too, like, schedule it out, make sure that it's not just for the senior pastor, but it's also for, other people in ministry that are doing it full time, to make sure that it's scheduled and that you encourage vacations at your church. And then also I would say a good balance too for senior pastors is to preach 60% of the time, 60 to 80. It's going to be harder for others than it is for some. But when you are preaching 90 to 95% of every Sunday, it becomes very tough on being able to get that fresh vision because like just for me, I don't preach that often. I preach once every 2-3 months. And like, I like to plan out 3 weeks in advance if I can, just to be able to really dive into the message. And I feel for you, like preaching every week almost, it is tough, like to be able to come up with fresh content and be able to plan it through and pray it through and be able to speak it. And it is a skill set. It is a gifting. It is something that not everyone can do, but also going back to supporting your pastors, like they don't need your criticism. It's not that you can't bring up critical things. It's just that lead with encouragement. Like I can think of 5, 6, 7 people at my church that are always encouraging. And I just love talking to them because no matter what you do, or you think you failed, they'll just be like, hey, great message today. It touched me by, that God showed me this. So your pastors are human. They are, fallible. They will fail you because only Jesus will not fail us. And so that's why they need our support and they need your encouragement.
Yeah, for me, the fresh vision comes in unexpected times, and that's how God in this season is really, patterned out what what I'm doing and how he communicates that kind of stuff with me.
Yeah.
Because you're right. Like the main priority of the week is, as a part-time pastor of a startup that is trying to, like you said, preach the majority of weeks, because we're not quite at the point where I can just be like, yep, we're out, let's pay somebody while I'm gone. It's challenging to just kind of repeat. It's like you talked about when you were working and you would go home and you'd go to bed and you wake up the next morning and you're like, and now we've got another truck and another shipment. There's always another Sunday coming. Sunday you preach, and whether the message, I'm not one of these guys that's like, I felt that message went good. The message didn't go so good. The message. I honestly, like, I just kind of learned from my dad. I don't put a lot of weight in it. Like, I know how much time I spent during the week, how much time of prayer I spent. I deliver it, and once I've delivered it, I'm good with it. So I don't kind of get into all that, like, I just felt like the congregation didn't respond, or I didn't hear anything, or I didn't hear this. And yeah, I'm out on that. But then Monday you wake up and you're like, oh yeah, we're 6 days away, guys. We're 6 days away. And it's just, the trucks keep coming. The Sundays keep coming. And, and when you're the guy, you're the guy. So it is a battle. It is challenging. I do find, though, that podcast and talking to people and things like this. I mean, we spoke on the phone even yesterday, like just talking with people on the phone. I'm such an open processor, out loud processor. I need to think through things out loud with people that are smarter than me. And that's why I called you. So we like doing things like that throughout the week, man, it just makes me think.
Yeah.
And it makes me really get on a higher level of understanding. And so after I get off the phone with you, even if I'm just driving somewhere, now I'm in this like unbelievable mindset where I've been fueled to figure something out. So I try to leverage that, try to figure out how to have those best conversations so that I can, like you said, not necessarily have to be in a position to take a lot of time away or a sabbatical. But yeah, man, like you gotta have a break.
Yeah.
You got to be able to figure it out. So for our listeners, you might be in a spot where you're working a job right now and you're burned out, or you feel like you're on the way to burnout. Or maybe you're past it. You've already quit. And now you're like, oh my gosh, now what? I also recognize that there might be some parents that are listening that are going, my job's not the problem. And I'm feeling burned out as a spouse. I'm feeling burned out as a parent, as a mom, as a dad. And I just want to encourage you that there are some things that you can't take a sabbatical from.
Right.
There are some things you can't take time off from. And I hate to tell you that, but you're always going to be a mom or dad, or you're always going to be a spouse if you've locked into that. And what I want to encourage you with is the things that we've talked about being proactive, spending time alone with God, making sure that you lead yourself well. Like it's important there too.
Yeah.
And you can be the best at your job, and you can just work your tail off, and you can survive and conquer burnout. But you gotta, like, please don't get burned out at home.
Right.
Please don't do that. Lead yourself well there too, and have God guide you in that as well. And if you're getting to the point where you're breaking, if you're getting to the point where you're like, I can't do this anymore, then you need to go see someone. You need to go see a counselor, a Christian counselor, preferably. And you need to start getting some help, because the one thing, like we said, it's a fight. We don't give up. We battle through. But the way that we fight is not, we don't fight by just leaving and making a better situation, because that helps our feelings. Like, we fight with scripture. We fight with what God has said about us. We fight with prayer. We fight with worship, and we'll help you fight. If you're in those positions, and whether it's work or whether it's at home, if you're in, or whether it's your relationship, like if you're in those positions, like, we're not at a point where I can counsel you, where I could take an hour every week to talk to you. But if you want to send the show a message, we'll absolutely pray for you, and we'll absolutely reach back out
Yeah,
and
for sure.
help you any way we can. But it's really important, I think, from a Christian standpoint, that we manage burnout in an appropriate way. And that's just as important in the home as in the workplace. We want to make sure it's with integrity. We want to make sure if we do leave the workplace that we leave well. And we want to make sure at home that we're always making sure we're in a good place to lead.
Yeah. Great way to end. I would say go to the Eyes on Jesus Facebook community. Let us know if you're comfortable talking about a story of burnout. Others will be able to hear that and be encouraged by it. Or if you're struggling with it or have ways to handle burnout that we haven't addressed, feel free to either reply to a post from this episode or start a new post. You can start a new post in there too, and just keep it relevant to the show. And we appreciate you all listening. And
Yeah.
like Drew said, email us. We're open. We will pray for you. We'll try to help you however best we can. We want this to be a community where we all keep our eyes on Jesus together. So until next time, go with God, grow in discernment, keep your eyes on Jesus.